Hello and welcome. You're watching the News Unlocked, the show that takes you behind the headlines to the real big stories of our times. Now, even as most countries across the globe are slowly moving past the total lockdown mode, coronavirus cases continue to rise exponentially. The overall number of global coronavirus cases have now topped 28 million, while the deaths have increased to over 9,08,000. At such a time, the world is anxiously awaiting a vaccine. That's right, all eyes are on the vaccine. But this week, the COVID vaccine race hit a roadblock, with the Oxford University AstraZeneca vaccine candidate considered one of the safest and the most promising vaccines, and one that is being done in coordination with the Serum Institute of India. That vaccine was halted after a patient developed severe neurological side effects. Today we are going to focus on this vaccine race. What lies ahead? We're going to be talking to some top epidemiologists on it. But before that, let's take a look as to what's gone wrong, or is it just a temporary setback with the Oxford vaccine? Take a look.
On 9 September, the third and final phase trial of one of the world's most promising vaccines was halted in the UK. AstraZeneca, the manufacturer of the Oxford vaccine, and a team of researchers at University of Oxford decided to temporarily stop the late-stage studies after one of the volunteers developed illness during the clinical trials. The UK-based candidate was diagnosed with transverse myelitis, an inflammatory syndrome which affects the spinal cord.
This has happened before, and then the pause has been lifted, but it just shows how much of an emphasis we put on the safety of the vaccine, even though, of course, we're all desperate to see it work.
The Oxford candidate is widely seen as a potential vaccine for the world. Most countries have already signed preliminary deals to get the vaccine if trials proved successful. Phase 3 trial of this vaccine was going on in 4 different countries across the world. In India, the Serum Institute, which has tied up for its manufacture, was all set to start the Phase 3 trials. But on 9 September, the Drugs Controller General of India issued a show-cause notice to Serum Institute, putting a halt to the trial till it gets clearance from the international authorities.
We hope that in the end, of course, the sequence will be, like it often is, like the safety committee tells you can restart the study, but they may also reach a different conclusion, and we have to accept that. I mean, the decision is in their hands, and there's nothing we can do to learn more until basically the whole process has unfolded.
While an independent group of experts began investigating the severe illness that one of the volunteers developed, the WHO said there was nothing to be discouraged about.
I think this is a good, perhaps a wake-up call or a lesson for everyone to recognize the fact that there are ups and downs in research, there are ups and downs in clinical development. And we have to be prepared for those. It's not always a fast and a straight road.
Meanwhile, with the caseload mounting each day, the vaccine makers and the world at large hopes the volunteer's illness during the third and final stage of testing is unrelated to the vaccine.
So let's first look at this Oxford vaccine before we come to the other vaccines in this race. At this moment, I'm joined by Dr. K. Srinath Reddy. He is President of the Public Health Foundation of India. Also joining me is Dr. Prabhat Jha, Professor Global Health University in Toronto, to give us a global perspective. Thank you both very much for joining us. I want to come to you, Dr. Reddy, first. How big a setback is what happened to the Oxford vaccine this week, or do you believe it's simply a pause button which is being pressed?
Well, I think we still have to wait for our judgment on that till the Data Safety Monitoring Board gives its findings. But it is not entirely a surprise, because we know that in vaccine trials, there will be side effects, mostly mild, but sometimes can be severe. and they warrant attention and investigation. And should they appear to be consistent and quite serious, then of course the trial has to be completely stopped, because the safety considerations override anything else, particularly because we are giving vaccines to healthy human beings and not persons with disease, unlike in drug trials. Therefore, the moral responsibility is even more onerous. But in this particular case, they are investigating it. The jury is still out. We'll have to wait for the findings to see whether this particular event is causal or coincidental. Until that report comes back, we still have to hold our judgment.
Given what we've just heard from Dr. Reddy, Dr. Prabhat Jha, professor at the Global Health University of Toronto, is this entire process of what's happened in the last week also revealing the limitations of putting extra pressure, in a sense, on virologists, on scientists, setting deadlines? Vaccines cannot work to deadlines.
That's true, and I think it is an emphasis that this due scientific process that Dr. Reddy outlined does need to be followed. I'm heartened by the fact that there's such a global effort to try to get vaccines, but we need to be cautious. Probably there will not be a single vaccine. We're looking at probably a suite of vaccines. For example, there might be some vaccines that you can't give in the ages that women get pregnant because of potential effects or uncertainty about birth defects. And there might be some vaccines that work better in older people than in younger ages. So what this calls for, and as the World Health Organization has very much emphasized, is global cooperation on vaccine development and on their use. Any one country, any one scientist saying we can solve this problem, well, we know that that's not going to work. So it does require global cooperation. That's happening at an unprecedented pace. The main concern of that, however, is what's called vaccine nationalism, where you see that the Russians have said, well, we have our vaccine, we're going to start use it. The Chinese government has made similar claims, and we're hearing noises from the US that the US will first worry about its own population and vaccinating them. So that's not a recipe for good global progress. What is needed is scientific cooperation, due diligence, and mostly shared decisions that make the vaccines available widely.
I'm going to ask both of you to hold your thoughts, because let's look at that global picture. The fact is, as you said, there are different candidates working in an unprecedented manner across the world, trying somehow to find that vaccine that can, in a way, provide an antidote to COVID-19. According to a recent tally, there are over 320 COVID-19 vaccines in development, most of which are in early stages of preclinical development. Several dozens are in clinical trials, and only a handful have become the final phase tests for efficacy. Take a look.
In August, Russia was the first country to announce COVID vaccine candidates, Sputnik V. The third phase trial of the vaccine started in the first week of September, when it was administered to volunteers in Moscow. Some 40,000 volunteers, including doctors, are going to be part of this 180 days long trial. They will get the vaccine free of charge.
Мы изучили этот вирус, мы научились его лечить. Ну, конечно же, мы ждали, когда появится вакцина, потому что для полной победы над вирусом необходима вакцина. Я, как врач, сделал себе эту вакцину и могу сказать одно, что никаких побочных явлений я на себе не испытал.
India is also gearing up for phase 3 trials of the Russian vaccine candidate. Meanwhile, China too is speeding up its phase 3 trial of the vaccine candidate being developed by China National Biotech Group and Sinovac Biotech. But as number of COVID positive dwindles in China, they have roped in 4 more countries to run late-stage human tests of their vaccine.
In July, Sinovac has already obtained the approval to conduct phase 3 trial in Brazil. And in August, we obtained another approval in Indonesia.
Serbia and Pakistan are among the new countries who have agreed to phase 3 trials of the Chinese vaccine candidate. The other two are Brazil and Indonesia. China has also given a go-ahead for clinical trials of a nasal spray vaccine against the deadly viral infection. As per reports in the Chinese official media, the phase 1 clinical trials of this nasal spray vaccine is likely to start in November, and authorities are in the process of recruiting volunteers for the same.
320 candidates for a vaccine for COVID-19. Dr. Srinath Reddy, is this about vaccine nationalism, as Dr. Jha put it, or is this at the end of the day about commerce? Everyone sees this pot of gold, or is it about health? Is it actually about public health?
Well, it's partly science and partly commerce, and as you said, vaccine nationalism as well. Because there are different types of vaccines using different pathways. And secondly, there are also what are called systemic vaccines, which produce a certain type of immunity, which can fight the infection after the virus has entered the body. But there are also some vaccines being developed called mucosal vaccines, which actually produce secretory antibodies, which prevent the vaccine actually from settling into the nose. And those are still under development, and they have to enter the clinical trial stage. So science itself offers a fairly wide menu of potential vaccine possibilities with different platforms for development. But alongside, there has been a sense of urgency among various countries because of the global panic created by this pandemic, that they must try and get hold of a vaccine that they will have access to, and that they do not have to necessarily depend upon uncertain global supplies. So that is one part of the vaccine nationalism. The third element of vaccine nationalism is when they want to demonstrate that their science is superior, and secondly, exploit the commercial opportunity of a panicked world rushing in for procuring vaccine from them. So all of these, pure science, pure commerce, and pure politics, form a fairly a demonstrable mixture here in this race for vaccines.
Let me get Dr. Jha to respond to that. Pure science, pure commerce, pure politics. What do you think it is? What is it when, for example, the US President Donald Trump, for example, says that he hopes that America will have a vaccine in place by the first week of November? We know elections are taking place, so therefore that seems like pure politics. Oxford would seem to be much more pure science, but you've got companies now vying with each other, even for the Oxford vaccine, that suggests it's pure commerce. Where do you stand?
Well, the important thing for governments is to not only draw upon the science or commercial nationalism interest, but wisdom, and be cautious that a vaccine alone will not be the panacea that we all perhaps think it will be. That's in part because we don't know enough about the immunology of the infection. For example, the open question, would the large numbers of people that are in the slums of Bombay that have already been shown to be infected, would they get vaccines? That's an uncertainty. We don't quite know in which populations the vaccine will work the best. What this means for governments, however, is yes, there's a rush to try to get this together, but that's not an excuse for displacing good scientific judgment and wisdom about how to think about which target group should be identified upfront. The World Health Organization has said, for example, healthcare workers, the elderly, and those with chronic diseases. Now, in India, the total of that would be about 250 million people that are in that target group. So there is an important role of identifying the appropriate populations that might be at the front of the line for a vaccine. There's an appropriate role also for thinking, well, you cannot have an entire COVID strategy rest on a yet uncertain technology. There are very effective interventions, and Dr. Reddy's written eloquently about these, that need to be done, which involves scaling up of testing, contact tracing, the ability to have personal protective equipment as a universal precaution. Those things, and in particular, really simple, low-cost, home-based diagnostics, I think are an important strategy that governments need to say, in addition to vaccines, you can't bet on just one technology. You have to have multiple technologies ready.
No, but Dr. Jha, just look at the way the vaccine nationalism is pushing forward. The Russians claim that they've got a vaccine that's cracked it. You've got the Chinese, which seem to be now working in their own, working towards sort of developing a vaccine, they say by November. And you've got India also, where you might recall at one stage, ICMR seemed to suggest that it might happen by the 15th of August. I'm just trying to understand, can vaccines work to deadlines, you believe, Dr. Jha? Is that one of the problems this time? We've had Ebola, we've had malaria, we've had other diseases in the past, which have taken years to develop a vaccine. Now it seems to be as if, let's get it done like tomorrow.
Well, that push for large-scale science on the whole has been welcome. But what is important is to know that along with the political push, I mean, what leader wouldn't want to say, I brought you a vaccine and be seen as a hero? There are structures in place, scientists, regulatory authorities, the World Health Organization imprinter, that emphasizes safety and relevance of a vaccine before it's accepted by the politicians. So that's the job, I think, of politicians to say, I'm going to be the hero. But the job of scientists and the job of institutions in society is to make those measurements and decisions very carefully. But I think on the whole, it's a welcome global enterprise that is trying to accelerate solutions for this worldwide pandemic.
Let me bring in Dr. Reddy. Dr. Reddy, look at the way India is progressing also with this vaccine. There seems to be inordinate pressure in a way on some of our scientists. As I mentioned, there were talks of an August 15 deadline, which was clearly unrealistic. And, there is this pressure of competing with other countries. Can we be, even Pakistan now, we are told, has entered the vaccine race. Where does this stem from? This was not the case in the past. Why has it happened now? What is so unusual about COVID-19 that seems to have put pressure on governments, which in turn put pressure on scientists?
Well, I think it is the threat posed by the global pandemic. Some of the threat may have been overhyped. But nevertheless, the panic that set in across the world actually triggered, as you know, lockdowns and a variety of containment measures, which have also affected the economy adversely. And therefore, there is natural pressure on governments to try and find solutions. I certainly agree with Dr. Prabhat Jha that the public health solutions should not be neglected in this quest for a vaccine. Because the quest may actually end out to be fruitless. We do not know. We hope for a vaccine. We are pushing strong science, but we are actually investing in hope. And we don't know whether that hope will actually be fulfilled or not.
No, but nevertheless, but is there a worry? Is there a worry as a so sorry to intervene? As a scientist, as a specialist, do you worry sometimes when politicians start putting pressure on scientists to meet deadlines?
Absolutely. I think science should not be stampeded even to meet a dire public health emergency. The scientists will respond as per need. And where actually we can expedite the matters is preparing for recruitment of people to enter into trials. Even as phase 1, phase 2 trials are going on, you can start lining up people for a possible large phase 3 trial. You can cut short that waiting time. But you cannot cut short the time taken for scientific evaluation of the impact of the vaccine as well as the safety of the vaccine. I mean, impact both in terms of efficacy and safety. So science, as I said, cannot be cut short in that sense. Therefore, any political interference there would be improper, but certainly providing as much facilities as possible to scientists to conduct the trials in as large a number as required, that support can be provided by the political leadership.
You know, the worry, of course, Dr. Jha, is, and we've seen this particularly with the Russian vaccine, that the announcement that, you know, that the vaccine was all set to be launched was made by the Russian President Vladimir Putin, but that the approval was seen to be premature. Do you believe that, in a way, we need to keep the politics now completely out of this, that this has to be now left to the scientists, as with the Oxford vaccine, as with other vaccines, as with even the vaccine in this country, leave it to the scientists' judgment rather than the politicians taking the call?
I think that's probably a wise path, but you can't keep politics out of anything, really. And I think, as Dr. Reddy and I are both agreeing, that the important here is to take the opportunity. Don't let a crisis go to waste. It's a chance to really strengthen the scientific base. For example, India could lead the world in randomized trials by recruiting very large numbers very quickly. That in turn would give India leverage over the global picture. Because the trials are being tested, it gives you more insights and inroads in terms of being eventually able to use those. So politicians have their job. That's what they're supposed to do. But scientists and the public health institutions really should use the opportunity to say, let's do the best that we can, not ignore the key things that we know that work. Masks, physical distancing, testing, contact tracing, they do work, and accelerate those while waiting for a vaccine. So you can't have politics out of it, right? But it is a push for us to do more in public health, more on the science, and not simply say to the politicians, back off, because they won't back off. That's their job, is to keep pushing.
I take your point.
It's not, keep pushing the public.
I just have a minute. And I want to also remind our viewers that AstraZeneca, which has a market value of about $140 billion, largest weighting of companies in UK's FTSE 100 index, they've suffered a setback this week. Contrary, shares in Moderna and Biotech SC, which are working on rival vaccines, gained in late trading in New York. I just want to ask you both, 30 seconds each, which vaccine will come first? Should I be asking that question as a quiz question, Dr. Reddy? Yes or no? Who do you think has the edge?
No, it would be pure speculation. We have to wait for the trials to be over. We provide an answer. Betting right now without knowing how the trials are going to end would be improper scientifically. You asked us to stick to science, so I'll stick to science.
Very well put. You'll stick to science. Dr. Jha, you have a different answer. Are you a betting man? And tell me which vaccine do you expect to hit the market first?
Well, I bet on science and I bet on scientists. And despite the political pressures, I think we've got enough institutions and the World Health Organization and others that give us some semblance of pause and think we will make the right choices. So I'm optimistic that despite the pressures, we will have solutions. But we can't just have a single solution. We need multiple solutions.
And very quickly to both of you, by what, do you have a timeline, or is that also speculative, Dr. Reddy?
Well, I think the earliest that we can really see credible evidence of a vaccine which is both safe and effective, if it comes through, will be early next year. Because the evidence, even if it is completed by end of this year, still has to withstand scientific scrutiny.
Point taken. On that note, let's leave it there. I appreciate both of you joining us, giving us a sense of what lies ahead. And remember, even if it comes early next year, by the time it's distributed across large countries like India, that will take several months more. Either way, let's not call it a race. Let's call it science trying to find a solution. That's it on this special show. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Stay well.
Hi everyone, Preeti Chaudhary here. Hope you like this video. For latest news and analysis, like and subscribe to the India Today YouTube channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching.